The lecture hall of Galactic Concordance University buzzed with the sounds of 40 different species settling into their seats for Advanced Xenobiology 301. Some chittered, while others hummed or clicked, and a few made sounds that human ears could not even properly process. Professor Vilksa stood at the front of the enormous circular classroom. Her 6 legs tapped against the floor in the rhythmic pattern that her species used to call for attention. The Zentari professor was considered one of the finest xenobiology instructors in 3 sectors, and her compound eyes could observe every student simultaneously, which made cheating impossible and daydreaming inadvisable. Students came from 15 different worlds. There were the Kree with their bright feathers and sharp beaks that clicked when they spoke, the Morphians who existed as semi-solid gelatinous beings in specially designed containment suits, the Doroth, whose scaled bodies and double-jointed limbs made them look perpetually ready to pounce, and dozens of other species, all united by their desire to understand the biology of alien worlds. In the very back row sat Marcus Chen. He was the only human in the class, and one of only 3 humans currently enrolled at the university through the new exchange program. He had stayed up late the previous night cramming for an astrophysics exam, and now found himself fighting to keep his eyes open during what was supposed to be an easy lecture day. Marcus pulled out his lunch container from his backpack. Inside were neat portions of cut pineapple chunks, swimming in their own juice, along with some apple slices and a small bag of almonds. He popped in his earbuds and started listening to music from home while munching on the sweet yellow fruit. The familiar taste made him less homesick. Professor Vilksa activated the holoprojector at the center of the room. A massive 3-dimensional image materialized, showing a spiky oval-shaped object covered in hexagonal scales with a crown of sharp, blade-like leaves jutting from its top. The professor's translator device hummed to life. Students, today we begin our unit on deadly flora of Deathworld planets. Her voice carried the weight of someone about to discuss something truly dangerous. This specimen before you is known as Ananas camosus to use its scientific designation. The inhabitants of Earth call it the painapple, or in their translated tongue, pineapple. A ripple of shocked responses moved through the classroom. Several Kree students ruffled their feathers in alarm, while 3 Morphians visibly shuddered within their suits, causing their gelatinous forms to wobble. A Doroth student in the 3rd row hissed softly. As you can observe from the hologram, this fruit is encased in armor plating. Vilksa zoomed in on the hexagonal pattern. Each scale overlaps with its neighbors, creating a defensive barrier that has been measured to resist up to 40 newtons of force. This is sufficient to deter most herbivores on Earth and many small predators. She rotated the image to show the crown of leaves. These blade-like projections contain serrated edges sharp enough to pierce Morphian membrane tissue and cause lacerations to Kree skin. They serve as both a deterrent and a weapon. In the back row, Marcus finished his pineapple chunks and wiped his fingers on a napkin. He pulled out a whole tomato from his lunch bag and bit into it like an apple juice ran down his chin, and he wiped it away casually while bobbing his head to the music in his Earthship talk. A Kree student sitting 2 rows ahead of Marcus had turned around to retrieve a dropped stylus from the floor. His large eyes locked onto the human, and his beak fell open in silent shock. The human was eating something red and dripping. Chip Talks. Excellent memory recalled last week's lecture about Earth's bloodberries, also known as tomatoes. But the true danger of the painapple lies not in its exterior defenses. Professor Vilksa's voice took on an even more serious tone. The flesh of this fruit contains an enzyme called bromelain. This substance actively digests protein. When it comes into contact with living tissue, it begins to break down the cellular structure. She displayed a molecular diagram of bromelain. This enzyme is so potent that Earth's food processing industries use it as a meat tenderizer. Imagine, students, a fruit that can dissolve flesh. And yet, this is classified as merely moderately dangerous on the Earth danger scale. The classroom erupted in alarmed chatter. A Morphean student raised a gelatinous pseudopod. "Professor, surely no creature would attempt to consume such a thing." Vilksa's antennae twitched in what her species considered a grim expression. "That is where you would be incorrect. Student Glorp, humans discovered this fruit approximately 3,000 years ago and decided not only to consume it, but to cultivate it on a massive scale." She brought up historical images from Earth. They showed humans in agricultural settings surrounded by fields of pineapples to the alien students. It looked like a military operation in a minefield. Note the protective equipment they employ. Thick gloves to prevent the serrated leaves from cutting them. Long sleeves to avoid contact with the enzymes, even with their death world or physiology. Humans respect this fruit's dangerous nature. Chiptok could not take his eyes off. Marcus, the human, had finished the tomato and was now pulling out what looked like a red globe with a stem. An apple. Chiptok knew from his studies that apple seeds contained cyanogenic glycosides which broke down into cyanide in the digestive system. He frantically tapped his datapad trying to message his study partner Thera. A Darath student sitting next to Chiptok felt the vibration of the incoming message. She glanced at her datapad and read, "The human is eating death fruits." She slowly turned her head to look at the back row, and her vertical pupils contracted to thin slits. Sure enough, the human was casually consuming an entire apple while appearing completely relaxed. "Can anyone tell me the lethal dose of bromelain for a Xanthari of my size?" Professor Vilksa asked the class. The room fell silent as students consulted their notes. Marcus had just bitten into his apple when the quiet moment made him realize he should probably pay attention. He pulled out one earbud, and the sudden silence in the room struck him as odd. "Sorry. What was the question?" His voice carried clearly across the lecture hall. 40 pairs of alien eyes in various configurations turned to look at him. Some students gasped, while others made sounds of alarm. Marcus sat there with an apple core in one hand and his open lunch container visible on the desk. The empty pineapple container sat next to it, and he was reaching into a small bag of almonds. Professor Vilksa's compound eyes focused on the human student. Her translator made a small, glitching sound before recovering. "Human Marcus." Her voice came out strained. "What are you eating?" Marcus looked down at his lunch and then back at the professor with genuine confusion on his face. Snacks?" He held up the bag of almonds. "Just some fruit and nuts. Why? Is eating not allowed during lectures?" "I'm sorry. I should have asked." A Morphean student in the front row immediately evacuated half its water content onto the floor. In a panic response, 2 Kree students fainted and slid off their perches. A Darath student began hissing continuous livigs. Legs trembled slightly as she stared at the containers on Marcus's desk. She could clearly see the remains of pineapple chunks. Her voice came out as barely a whisper that the translator had to amplify. "You were eating pineapple? Just now? During my lecture about pineapple?" Marcus's face showed dawning comprehension and horror. "Oh no." He looked at the hologram still rotating at the center of the room, and then at his empty container. "Oh no, no, no." Professor Vilksa stood frozen at the front of the lecture hall, her 6 legs locked in position, and her compound eyes fixed on the human student who had apparently been consuming lethal flora during her entire lecture about lethal flora. Her translator device sparked once before resuming function. Everyone remained calm. She announced to the class, though her own voice carried anything but calm. "Human Marcus, I need you to tell me exactly what you have consumed and how much." Marcus set down his bag of almonds and started listing items on his fingers. I had about 2 cups of pineapple chunks, 1 whole tomato, this apple minus the core, and I was about to have some almonds." He paused and added helpfully, "Oh, and I had some strawberries earlier before class." The collective sound from the alien students resembled what a human might describe as 40 different species all screaming. In their own unique ways simultaneously, Professor Vilsa had to tap her legs rapidly on the floor multiple times to restore even a semblance of order. Chip-Tuck was frantically typing on his datapad with his wing claws, his messages to Stera came in rapid succession. He ate strawberries too. Those are the irritant seed weapons. Why is he not dead? Logi, why is he not even uncomfortable? Stera replied with shaking claws. Maybe Death World physiology is more extreme than we thought. Should we call medical? Should we evacuate? Professor Vilksa was already tapping her own communication device. This is Professor Vilksa in lecture. Hall 7. I have a code. You actually paused, because there was no code for this situation. I have a human who has consumed multiple deadly Earth flora specimens and appears to be asymptomatic, requesting immediate assistance from campus safety and the Human Liaison Office. Marcus raised his hand tentatively. Professor, I'm really sorry. I honestly didn't know we were talking about pineapples. I had my earbuds in and wasn't paying attention. He looked genuinely apologetic. But I'm fine, really. I eat this stuff all the time. A Duras student 3 rose. Ahead of Marcus, scrambled out of his seat and pressed himself against the far wall. All the time? His translator made his hiss sound even more alarmed than intended. You consume deadly enzymes all the time? Well, yeah, Marcus was now starting to realize that this was a much bigger misunderstanding than he had initially thought. Pineapple is pretty common. You can get it fresh or canned or dried. It's in fruit salads and smoothies and on pizza and… on what? Professor. Vilksa S. antennae stood straight up. You put the pineapple on more food? Before Marcus could answer, the doors to the lecture hall burst open. 3 campus security officers rushed in wearing full hazmat suits and carrying what appeared to be containment equipment. They stopped abruptly when they saw Marcus sitting calmly at his desk eating almonds, the lead security officer. A Brel with 4 arms and thick gray skin spoke through his suit's communicator. Where is the contaminated individual? Professor Vilksa pointed one of her legs toward Marcus. There. The human, he has consumed multiple specimens of Earth death flora, including pineapple, bloodberries, and cyanide nuts. The security officers looked at each other and then back at Marcus. The human gave them a small wave. Hi, sorry about all this. He's mobile? One officer said to another, the pineapple enzyme should have caused significant tissue damage by now. Maybe Deathworlders process it differently? The second officer suggested, we should establish a quarantine perimeter. Marcus stood up, which caused half the remaining students to flee the lecture hall. In panic, look, I really am fine. He held up his hands in a placating gesture. Humans eat these things. We've been eating them for thousands of years. The lead security officer began setting up yellow caution tape around Marcus's general area. Sir, please, remain where you are. We have called for the human coordinator. She will know proper protocols. Chip-Tuck had not fled. Instead, he watched with the morbid fascination of a scientist observing something that should be impossible. He whispered. To Stera, his tissue looks completely normal. No degradation. No chemical burns. No signs of enzyme damage. Stera's tail twitched nervously. Maybe the damage is internal? Maybe he's in shock and can't feel it? I can hear you, Marcus called out. I'm not in shock. I'm just confused and a little embarrassed. More. Footsteps echoed in the hallway, and Dr. Sarah Kim rushed into the lecture hall. She was a human woman in her 50s who served as the coordinator for human students at the university. She took one look at the scene. Hazmat-suited security officers. Caution tape. Fleeing students. Marcus standing there holding a bag of almonds. And the hologram of a pineapple still rotating at the center of the room. Dr. Kim closed her eyes and pinched the bridge of her nose. Let me guess. Someone forgot. to update the xenobiology curriculum to account for having an actual human in the class. Professor Vilks's antennae drooped slightly. The syllabus lists Earth flora as theoretical case studies. I did not anticipate. She gestured toward Marcus. Practical demonstrations. Doctor. Kim walked past the security officers and right up to Marcus. She looked at his lunch. Pineapple. Tomato, apple, almonds. Let me guess. You brought strawberries too? Marcus nodded. Yeah, had those earlier. I'm sorry, Dr. Kim. I really didn't mean to cause a panic. Dr. Kim turned to address the room. Everyone, I know this looks alarming from your perspective, but I need you to understand something important. Humans evolved on Earth. We are adapted to Earth food. What you call death flora is what we call lunch. A brave Morphean student who had not fled raised a pseudopod, but the bromelain enzyme. It digests protein. How do you not dissolve from the inside? We do have some reaction to it, Marcus interjected. If you eat a lot of pineapple, your mouth gets kind of tingly and sore. That's the enzyme working on your mouth tissue. But our bodies break down the enzyme in our stomach acid before it can do real damage. Professor Vilksa approached cautiously. Her scientific curiosity was beginning to override her alarm. Your digestive system neutralizes the bromelain? Well, yeah, Marcus shrugged. And the cooking process also breaks it down. That's why cooked pineapple doesn't make your mouth tingle as much. Dr. Kim seized on the teachable moment. Professor Vilksa, this could actually be a valuable learning opportunity with proper supervision and medical staff on standby. Marcus could do a practical demonstration of human food consumption for the class. The security officers looked at each other. Is that safe? One asked. For Marcus, absolutely. Dr. Kim replied. For the students, as long as they just observe and don't try to consume any of it themselves. Yes, Professor Vilksa's eyes seemed to light up with academic interest. The faculty board would need to approve such a demonstration. She was already tapping on her communication device, but the scientific value would be extraordinary. Chip Talk had been recording everything on his datapad. He looked at Stera. We have to stay for this. When will we ever get another chance to observe a Death Worlder consuming deadly substances in a controlled environment? Stera's scales rippled. With what her species used to express conflicted emotions, my survival instincts say flee, but my scientific curiosity says stay. Marcus sat back down at his desk and looked at Dr. Kim. So, I'm guessing this is going to be on my permanent record? Oh, definitely. Dr. Kim smiled. But probably not in the way you think. You might have just become the most interesting case study this university has seen in decades. The security officers began removing the caution tape after conferring with Dr. Kim. Professor Vilksa announced to the remaining students, class is dismissed for today. I will be restructuring the next several lectures to include practical observations with proper safety protocols. Attendance will be optional but highly encouraged for those interested in groundbreaking xenobiological research. As students began filing out, many kept glancing back at Marcus. Some looked terrified, others fascinated, and a few appeared to be taking photos with their various recording devices. Marcus packed up his lunch container and what remained of his snack ship. Talk approached the human cautiously. Human Marcus. I have a question if you don't mind. Marcus looked up. Sure. Go ahead. When you eat the pineapple, Chip Talk's beak clicked nervously. Does it bring you pleasure? Or is it simply nutritional efficiency? Marcus smiled. Oh no. It's delicious, sweet and tangy and juicy. Pineapple is one of my favorite fruits. Chip Talk's feathers ruffled in amazement. You enjoy it. He said the words slowly, as if trying to comprehend an alien concept. You derive pleasure from consuming enzyme weapons. When you put it that way, it sounds weird, Marcus admitted. But yeah, basically. The emergency meeting of the university's safety committee convened in under an hour. The room was packed with administrators, professors, security personnel, medical staff, and representatives from a dozen different species, all trying to understand what had happened in Lecture Hall 7 that morning. Dean Morthas, an elderly Zintari with graying chitin, stood at the head of the conference table. Let me make sure I understand the situation correctly. He looked at the incident report on his datapad. Human student consumed what our curriculum classifies as dangerous xenobiological specimens during a lecture specifically about those same specimens and suffered no ill effects. Dr. Kim nodded. That's correct, and I take full responsibility for not reviewing the xenobiology curriculum before our human exchange students arrived. It simply didn't occur to me that the course would cover Earth foods as hazards. Professor Vilksa raised one of her legs to speak. In our defense, the curriculum was designed decades before humanity made contact with the galactic concordance. Earth is classified as a Class 9 death world. Our assumptions about its flora and fauna being dangerous to most species are scientifically sound, except for the species that evolved there, Dr. Kim added, which is the gap in our education. Marcus sat between Dr. Kim and a Bro medical officer who had spent the last 30 minutes scanning him with various devices. All readings showed him in perfect health. He had apologized so many times that Dr. Kim had finally told him to stop. Dean Morthas tapped his communication device and brought up a holographic display. I have been reviewing the full xenobiology curriculum for the semester. According to this, the course planned to cover approximately 47 Earth species classified as dangerous. He looked at Marcus. How many of these 47 would you say you have personally consumed? Marcus leaned forward to look at the list. His eyes widened. Let me count. He started going down the list, pointing at items. Pineapple, yes. Tomatoes, yes. Potatoes, yes. Almonds, yes. Cashews, yes. Kidney beans, yes. Apple seeds, technically yes, by accident. He kept going down the list. Strawberries, yes. Cherries, yes. Peaches, yes. Apricots, yes. He paused about halfway through. Okay, this is going to take a while. It might be easier to count the ones I haven't eaten. The room fell silent. A Morphian medical officer wobbled in her containment suit. You have consumed over half of the most dangerous flora on your planet. Well, when you say it like that, it sounds dramatic, Marcus protested. But these are just normal foods where I come from. Like, everyone eats this stuff. Billions of humans every day. A Korean nutritionist named Sharik spoke up. But the toxins, the enzymes, the acids, how does your species not poison itself? Dr. Kim activated her own datapad and projected a simple diagram. Humans have several adaptations that allow us to process these foods. Our stomach acid has a pH between 1 and 2, which is strong enough to break down most plant enzymes and neutralize many toxins. Our livers are extremely efficient at filtering and processing toxic compounds, and we've learned preparation methods over thousands of years. Preparation methods? Professor Vilksa leaned forward with interest. Cooking, fermenting, soaking, selective breeding, Marcus explained. Like, kidney beans are toxic when raw, but completely safe when cooked properly. Almonds used to be much more toxic, but we bred them over generations to have lower cyanide content. We learned what parts of plants are safe to eat and what parts to avoid. Dame Morthas manipulated the hologram to show an image of a potato. This tuber contains solanine, a toxic alkaloid compound. You're telling me humans consume this regularly? Only when it's not green, Marcus clarified. Green potatoes have higher solanine levels, so we don't eat those. And we cook them, which reduces the toxin even more. Fried, baked, mashed, boiled? There are hundreds of ways to prepare potatoes, a Dureth biologist hissed thoughtfully. Your species didn't adapt to the toxins. You adapted your behavior and food preparation to work around them. Exactly. Dr. Kim smiled. That's the key difference. Humans are adaptable not just biologically, but culturally and technologically. We saw dangerous plants, and instead of avoiding them entirely, we asked, how can we make this safe? How can we make this nutritious? How can we make this delicious? Professor Vilks's antennae quivered with excitement. This is fascinating. Do you realize what this means for xenobiology education? We've been teaching about Earth flora as purely hazardous when we should be teaching about it as an example of species adaptation and food technology development. The dean nodded slowly. I see your point, Professor. However, we still have a duty to ensure student safety. We cannot have students from other species attempting to consume Earth foods and poisoning themselves. Absolutely agreed, Dr. Kim said firmly, which is why I propose we set up a controlled demonstration with proper safety protocols. Marcus could show the class how humans prepare and consume these foods, while we educate about the specific adaptations that make it safe for humans, but dangerous for others. The medical officer who had been scanning Marcus spoke up. From a medical standpoint, I support this proposal. The educational value is significant, and as long as non-human students are restricted to observation only, the risk is minimal. Dean Morthas considered for a long moment. Very well. I will approve this demonstration. Under the following conditions, it must be supervised by both Dr. Kim and medical personnel. It must take place in a controlled environment with proper safety equipment available. Attendance must be voluntary, and there must be clear warnings that non-human species should not attempt to replicate what they observe. Professor Vilksa was already making notes. I will completely restructure the next 3 weeks of curriculum. This could become a landmark case study in xenobiological adaptation. Marcus raised his hand tentatively. Can I ask a question? When the dean nodded, he continued, what do you all eat? I mean, what foods are normal for your species? The Cree nutritionist Sharik clicked their beak. For my species, we consume primarily grains and small insects. Very little acidity, no enzyme activity. Simple proteins that don't require extensive digestion. I subsist on mineral suspensions and simple sugars. The Morphean medical officer explained, complex organic compounds are difficult for my species to process. My people eat raw meat from herbivores on our homeworld. The Dureth biologist added, but it must be very fresh. Any bacterial growth or chemical changes make it toxic to us. Marcus looked amazed. So you can't eat leftovers or aged meat? Humans do dry aging and fermentation for flavor. Intentional bacterial growth on food. The Dureth looked horrified. That would be lethal to my species. Dr. Kim laughed. You see, Marcus, every species has their own definition of what's edible to them. Our foods look insane, but I'm sure some of our foods would find their dietary choices equally strange. I mean, no offense. Marcus looked at the Cree nutritionist. But eating insects does sound a little weird to me. Sharik's feathers ruffled in what might have been amusement. And to me, consuming acid fruits full of digestive enzymes sounds equally weird. I suppose we are even. The meeting continued for another hour as they worked out the specific details of the demonstration. Location, timing, required safety equipment, documentation procedures, and liability waivers. By the end, it was agreed that the demonstration would take place in 3 days in the xenobiology lab, which had better containment and safety features than a standard lecture hall. As the meeting adjourned, Professor Vilksa approached Marcus and Dr. Kim. Human Marcus, I want to apologize. My lecture was insensitive to your presence in the class. I should have considered that having an actual human student would require curriculum adjustments. Marcus shook his head. No, Professor, I should have been paying attention instead of listening to music. And honestly, I learned something today too. I never really thought about how weird our food must seem to other species. That's the beauty of xenobiology. Vilksas, Translator conveyed warmth. Every species teaches us something new about the diversity of life in the galaxy. You have given us all a valuable lesson today, even if it was unintentional. Chip Talk had been waiting outside the conference room when Marcus emerged. The Cree student practically bounced with excitement. Human Marcus! I heard there will be a demonstration. Please tell me it's open to students. Voluntary attendance only, Dr. Kim warned. And absolutely no tasting or touching any of the food items. I understand. Chip Talk's eyes were bright. I have already messaged half my dormitory about this. Everyone wants to see. The human consume death fruits. Marcus couldn't help but laugh. You know, where I come from, we just call it eating lunch. That, Chip Talk said seriously, is perhaps the most terrifying thing you have said all day. 3 days later, Xenobiology Lab 3 had been transformed into something between a cooking show set and a hazmat containment facility. Marcus stood at a prepared workspace with cutting boards, knives, and various earth fruits and vegetables. Arranged before him, behind him, was a large display screen that could show microscopic detail or chemical compositions. To his left stood Dr. Kim and 2 medical officers with scanning equipment. To his right, Professor Vilksa waited with academic excitement, practically vibrating through her antennae. The observation area had been set up with reinforced, transparent barriers between Marcus and the student audience. Every seat was filled and students stood in the back where space allowed. Chip Talk had claimed a front row position 3 hours early and had not moved since. Stara sat beside him with her datapad ready to take extensive notes. Dean Morthas entered and surveyed the setup with approval. He moved to the podium position to the side. Students, faculty, and observers, welcome to what we believe is a first in Galactic Concordance academic history, a practical demonstration of death world or food consumption and preparation. He paused as murmurs rippled through the crowd. I must emphasize that what you are about to observe is safe only for humans. Under no circumstances should any non-human species attempt to replicate these actions. Medical staff are present. As a precaution, and recording equipment is active for documentation purposes. Professor Vilksa stepped forward. Today, human Marcus will demonstrate the preparation and consumption of several Earth flora, specimens that our curriculum has classified as dangerous. He will explain the methods humans used to make these items safe for consumption and the biological adaptations that allow his species to process these foods. Marcus gave a small wave to the crowd. He still felt somewhat ridiculous, but Dr. Kim had convinced him this was important for cross-cultural understanding. Hi everyone. So, I'm just going to make what humans call a fruit salad. It's a pretty normal snack or dessert for us. We'll go through each ingredient and I'll explain what we do to prepare it. He picked up a whole pineapple. The crowd collectively leaned back. Okay, so this is a pineapple. Professor Vilksa correctly identified that it has a tough exterior and sharp leaves. The first step in preparation is removing these parts, because even humans don't eat them. Using a large knife, Marcus cut off the crown of leaves. Several students gasped. He then sliced off the bottom and began cutting away the spiky skin in smooth downward strokes. See, we use tools. The skin is tough, but it's just plant matter. Once it's removed, we get to the edible flesh inside. The golden yellow interior of the pineapple was revealed. Marcus cut it into chunks and placed them in a glass bowl. Now, Professor Vilksa mentioned bromelain, the enzyme that breaks down protein. She was absolutely right that it's there, and it's active. If I eat a lot of raw pineapple, my mouth and tongue will feel tingly or even sore because the enzyme is literally digesting the tissue in my mouth a little bit. He popped a chunk into his mouth and chewed. The audience watched in horrified fascination. But here's the thing. My saliva and stomach acid break down the bromelain enzyme itself. It gets digested. before it can do serious damage. Plus, the tingling is actually considered part of the experience. Humans like it because it means the pineapple is fresh and ripe. A brave Morphean student raised a pseudopod. You enjoy the pain? It's not really pain. It's more like a strong sensation. Marcus tried to explain, and it goes away quickly. Also, if we cook pineapple, the heat denatures the enzyme completely. Cooked pineapple doesn't cause any tingling at all. Professor Vilksa pulled up a molecular diagram on the main display. Fascinating. So you tolerate the enzyme activity because your digestive system can neutralize it faster than it can cause serious damage. Exactly, Marcus confirmed. And humans have been eating pineapple for thousands of years. If it was really dangerous to us, we would have figured that out and stopped. Next, he picked up several strawberries. These were called irritant seed weapons in your database. He held one up to show the seeds dotting its surface. The seeds are on the outside of the fruit, which is unusual. And yes, they have tiny amounts of compounds that could be irritating in large quantities. He bit into a strawberry, but humans don't eat pounds and pounds of strawberry seeds. We eat them in normal amounts where the compounds are negligible. Plus, strawberries are sweet and delicious and full of vitamin C, which humans need to stay healthy. The benefits way outweigh any tiny risk. Dr. Kim added to the explanation. This is an important concept in human food science. The dose makes the poison. Many foods contain trace amounts of toxic compounds, but in small quantities, they're either harmless or actually beneficial. Marcus moved on to an apple. Okay, this one is interesting. Apple seeds do contain a compound called amygdalin, which can release cyanide when digested. The crowd made various alarm noises, but humans don't eat the seeds. We eat around them, see? He bit into the apple carefully, eating the flesh but avoiding the core. Also, you would need to chew and digest hundreds of apple seeds to get a dangerous dose. Accidentally swallowing a few seeds whole won't hurt you because they'll just pass through undigested. Chip Talk was recording everything. He called out a question, but why take any risk at all? Why not simply avoid foods with toxic components? Marcus considered this while cutting the apple into slices, because they taste good and they're nutritious. Humans need variety in our diet. If we only ate perfectly safe foods with zero toxic compounds, we'd miss out on a lot of nutrients and flavors. Our bodies are adapted to handle small amounts of various compounds. He added almonds to the bowl. Almonds are another great example. Wild almonds contain high levels of cyanide compounds and are actually quite dangerous. But thousands of years ago, humans found some almond trees with a genetic mutation that produce sweet almonds with much lower toxin levels. We selectively bred those trees, and now most almonds are the safe, sweet variety. You genetically modified your food to be less deadly? Stara asked while taking notes. Well, not genetic modification in the modern sense. Dr. Kim clarified. More like selective breeding over many generations. Humans would plant seeds from the trees that produce the best and safest nuts. Eventually, we changed the species through cultivation. Marcus added some cut tomatoes to his fruit salad. Tomatoes are interesting because they're actually a fruit, even though humans usually treat them like a vegetable. The leaves and stems of the tomato plant are toxic, but the fruit itself is safe and really good for you, Professor. Vilksa brought up an image of a potato on the display. What about these tubers? They contain solanine. Yes, but mostly in the skin and in green parts, Marcus explained. Humans peel potatoes or we make sure to cut away any green sections, and cooking further reduces the toxin. Boiled potatoes, fried potatoes, baked potatoes, they're a staple. Food for billions of humans. He continued working as he talked, creating a colorful mix of fruits in his bowl. I think the key thing to understand is that humans don't ignore the dangers of our food. We respect them. but we've learned how to work with them through preparation methods, cooking, selective breeding, and understanding proper portions. It's like a treaty with the plants. Chiptok said thoughtfully. You found ways to coexist with dangerous flora instead of simply avoiding them. That's actually a really good way to put it. Marcus smiled. Humans are good at adapting. If something is dangerous but useful, we figure out how to make it work. He held up his completed fruit salad. It was a mixture of yellow pineapple chunks, red strawberries, white apple slices, and red tomato pieces with almonds scattered throughout. So this is the final result. To me, this is just a healthy snack. To you all, this probably looks like a bowl of various weapons and toxins. It is quite colorful, though, a Cree student admitted. Aesthetically pleasing, even if conceptually terrifying. Marcus began eating the fruit salad with a spoon. The audience watched with rapt attention as he consumed spoonful after spoonful. The medical officers continuously scanned him and displayed his vital signs on a side monitor. Everything remained completely normal. No tissue degradation, one medical officer reported. No spike in inflammatory markers. No signs of distress. Because this is literally just lunch for me, Marcus said between bites. I've probably eaten this exact combination of foods 100 times before. A Dura student raised a claw. Do all human foods come from plants? You mentioned you also consume meat? Oh yeah. Humans are omnivores, Marcus confirmed. We eat plants and animals. Our diet is really varied, which is part of why our digestive system is so adaptable. Daniel Kim pulled up a chart on the display. Human dietary history shows consumption of hundreds of plant species and dozens of animal species. This variety meant we needed digestive systems that could handle many different compounds and food types. Professor Vilksa was making extensive notes. The more I learn, the more I realize we need to completely restructure how we teach about Earth biology. It's not just that the planet is dangerous. It's that the dominant species learn to thrive in that danger. Marcus finished his fruit salad and set down the bowl. Any other questions? The question and answer session lasted for 2 hours. Students wanted to know everything from how humans discovered that cooking made food safer to whether humans could taste the toxins in their food. Marcus answered each question as best he could, while Dr. Kim provided the scientific background by the end. Even Dean Morthes admitted that this had been one of the most educationally valuable sessions he had witnessed in his 30 years at the university. Professor Vilksa approached Marcus after most of the crowd had dispersed. Human Marcus, I want to thank you. Today you have given me enough material to restructure my entire advanced xenobiology curriculum. I'm considering proposing a new course specifically about adaptation strategies of species from high-risk environments. I'm glad I could help. Marcus was relieved that the demonstration had gone well. And I learned a lot too. I never really thought about why humans can eat what we eat. I just, ate it. That's the difference between living something and studying it. Vilksa's antennae bobbed thoughtfully. You have experiential knowledge that no amount of database research could have given me. Over the next few weeks, word of the demonstration spread across campus. Marcus found himself something of a celebrity. Students from other departments would stop him to ask about Earth food. The university's student newsfeed ran a story titled The Human Who Survived Death Fruit, which Marcus found both embarrassing and hilarious. The xenobiology course itself transformed dramatically. Professor Vilksa brought in samples of various Earth food sealed in stasis containers that students could observe safely. She devoted entire lectures to human food preparation techniques and the cultural significance of different dishes. Attendance in her class tripled as students from other programs audited just to learn about Death World or dietary habits. One afternoon, about a month after the initial incident, Marcus was in the campus cafeteria eating his lunch when Chiptok approached his table. The Cree student's feathers were fluffed up in a way Marcus had learned indicated nervousness or excitement. "Human Marcus, may I sit with you?" Chip-Talk asked, of course. "Chip-Talk," Marcus gestured to the seat across from him. "What's up?" The Cree student settled onto the perch-style seat designed for his species. "I have a request that may be inappropriate, but I've been thinking about it since your demonstration." Marcus swallowed his bite of sandwich. "Okay. What is it?" "I would like to try a small piece of pineapple." Chip-Talk said the words quickly, as if afraid he would lose courage. "Pineapple. I mean, you made it look so pleasant, and the flavor profile you described has made me curious." Marcus blinked in surprise. "Are you sure? Did you check if it's safe for Cree physiology?" "I consulted with 3 different medical professionals." Chip-Talk pulled out his datapad showing medical clearances. "In very small quantities? With supervision and antidotes standing by, it should not be lethal. I may experience some discomfort, but the risk is manageable." "You're willing to risk discomfort just to taste pineapple?" Marcus was genuinely touched. "You spoke of the sweetness and the tang and how humans derive pleasure from the experience." Chip-Talk's beak clicked thoughtfully. "I realized I have spent my whole life learning about other species biology, but I have never tried to understand their experiences. If I want to be a true xenobiologist, I should try to understand not just the chemistry, but the culture." Marcus considered this. "Okay, but we're doing this properly. Let me talk to Dr. Kim, and we'll set something up with medical supervision." 2 days later, a much smaller gathering assembled in one of the medical labs. Chip-Talk sat on a perch with 2 Brel medical officers standing by with monitoring equipment and emergency supplies. Dr. Kim supervised while Marcus carefully cut an extremely thin slice of pineapple, about the size of a human fingernail. "Remember, this is way more potent for you than for me," Marcus warned. "If it hurts or feels wrong, spit it out immediately." Chip-Talk nodded and opened his beak. Marcus placed a tiny piece of pineapple on the Cree's tongue. For a moment, nothing happened. Then Chip-Talk's eyes widened and his feathers stood completely on end. The medical officers tensed. "Should we intervene?" Chip-Talk held up a wing to stop them. He closed his beak and appeared to be carefully experiencing the taste. After a few seconds, he swallowed and made a sound that the translator rendered as surprise mixed with delight. "It is sweet," Chip-Talk exclaimed. "And yes, there is a burning sensation, but underneath it is this bright, sharp, pleasant taste unlike anything I have experienced before." Marcus grinned. "That's the pineapple. How's your mouth feeling?" "Tingling significantly," Chip-Talk admitted, "but not unbearably so. It is strange, but not entirely unpleasant." The medical officers scanned him thoroughly. Elevated sensitivity in the oral cavity, but no dangerous swelling or allergic response. Vitals remained stable. Dr. Kim made notes. "Interesting. Cree physiology can tolerate bromelain in microdoses. That's actually useful data." Chip-Talk looked at Marcus with something that might have been understanding. "I see now why you eat these things. There is something exciting about a food that has this much." "What is the word? Personality?" "Exactly." Marcus was delighted that Chip-Talk got it. "That's what makes food interesting. Not just nutrition, but experience." Word of Chip-Talk's experiment spread quickly. Suddenly, Marcus found himself inundated with requests from students wanting to try tiny samples of Earth foods under medical supervision. Dr. Kim had to establish a formal program with proper protocols and liability waivers. The university cafeteria eventually created a special section called Death Worlder Cuisine Experience, where non-human students could sample minute portions of various Earth foods under staff supervision. It came with extensive warning labels and required signed acknowledgement of risks, but it became wildly popular. Marcus volunteered to help staff the section twice a week. He would explain each food item and watch as brave alien students tried flavors they had been taught to fear. Some reactions were negative. A Morphian student tried a microscopic amount of lemon juice and immediately evacuated half their mass in distress. But many reactions were positive. HFY the Wrath tried a thin slice of strawberry and described it as surprisingly pleasant despite the seed texture. A group of Zentari students developed a fondness for mild apple sauce, which their digestive systems could process in small amounts. Even Professor Vilksa tried a heavily diluted pineapple juice and admitted it was fascinatingly complex. One evening near the end of the semester, Marcus sat in the common area of his dormitory building with Chiptok, Stera, and several other students who had become his regular study group. They were supposed to be reviewing for finals, but the conversation had drifted to food. "I've been thinking," Stera said while working through a calculus problem, "about what you said during the demonstration, about humans adapting to danger rather than avoiding it." "Yeah?" Marcus looked up from his chemistry notes. "I think that applies to more than just food." Stera continued. "Humans join a galactic community full of species more advanced than them, and instead of being intimidated, you just—" "What did you say?" "Figure out how to make it work." Chiptok clicked his beak in agreement. "You adapt. It is your defining characteristic. Your technology was centuries behind ours when we made contact, but you learned, and now you attend our universities and contribute to our research. We're good at learning from others," Marcus admitted. "Humans have always been like that. We see something new and we try to understand it, even if it's dangerous," Chiptok added. "You tried pineapple even though it fights back. You joined the galactic community even though you were the newcomers. You faced challenges directly." Marcus had never thought about it that way. "I guess when you put it like that." "Yeah. Humans don't like to back down from challenges. We're stubborn like that." "Stubborn," repeated the word. "Is that why you stayed in xenobiology class even after the incident?" Many beings would have transferred out of embarrassment. "Honestly, it turned into the most interesting class I'm taking." Marcus laughed. "Professor Vilksa completely changed her teaching style, and now we're learning about adaptation strategies across dozens of species. It's fascinating." "She told me you inspired her," Chiptok said. "She said that your demonstration reminded her why she became a biologist, to understand not just what makes species different, but what makes them successful." The conversation drifted to other topics. Upcoming exams, plans for the break between terms, a camping trip that Marcus was organizing to a nearby nature preserve where several students wanted to see him interact with wild plants. As the study session wound down and students began heading back to their rooms, Chiptok lingered for a moment. "Human Marcus, I want you to know that having you in our class has changed how I think about xenobiology. Before, I saw it as cataloging dangers and differences. Now I see it as understanding how different species find their own ways to thrive." Marcus smiled. "That means a lot, Chiptok, and having all of you as friends has changed how I think about humanity's place in the galaxy. We're not just the weird Deathworlders. We're part of this bigger community where everyone has something unique to contribute."